We good? I still remember the days when I first came to Finland. I had a lot of shocking experiences, and today I'm going to share with you two of those shocking experiences. The first day that I was in Finland, crazy Finns made me try Avanto. And believe me, I mean, look, my body is made for a desert climate. And I was deep in the Avanto, and all my organs, everything in my body was just like shouting, mitä ihmettä. And I was not speaking Finnish back then. But then I started to learn that Finns actually enjoy this change in extreme, and they love extreme experiences. And they enjoy this change of moving from a very hot sauna to a very cold water, Avanto. And little by little, I also started loving it. And I especially loved when the change in this temperature thrilled my body. And today we're also going to be talking about a change that might feel or seem like a first novel Avanto experience, and we're gonna see whether it's gonna thrill us to love it and eventually enjoy it too. The second experience, which was very shocking for me, was with my supervisor. I realized in Finland there's equality and it's a non-authoritative and no hierarchical system. And I have to admit, it took me honestly a while to start calling my professor or my supervisor, PhD supervisor, Timo, instead of calling him Professor Närhi. And in this non-authoritative system, it felt more like, Timo was my research colleague, and he was not an authoritative boss telling me what to do. And I realized that in Finland, we tend to work together. And as I went on, as the days passed, I passed by the corridors of the labs of the university. I started seeing amazing, advanced research infrastructure. And I also met perfectionists, people who did their job honestly and very carefully. And again today, we're going to be talking about a pilot experiment designed by the same Finnish perfectionists. And the pilot experiment or project is going to, or is aiming to, make something that's working already good work even better. Before we move on with the event and talking about how the program of the day would be, I would like to remind you that we got the Finnish Union of University Researchers and Teachers here with us today. So please remember to check them out. Go on their website. For all of you who are online, for all of you who are physically here, we got the representatives. And it's going to be exciting. Check their materials. Check the surveys they have. What we're going to do is we're going to be talking today about different aspects and explore different sides of doctoral education, whether it's funding, whether it's supervision, when it comes to career paths. And we're going to be having discussions to tackle all these points. And we're going to be comparing the now and the future of doctoral education in Finland. And remember, this event is for all of us to share thoughts and contribute together to shape the future of doctoral education in Finland. I would love to invite Tero Karjalainen, yes, to give us a few words. He's the president of the Finnish Union of University Researchers and Teachers. Stage is all yours, Tero.
Thank you, Khalil, or Kalle, as I noticed that
That's
you
my
are
nickname.
also called.
I love it.
Thank you. So, and welcome to this event, Shaping the Future of Doctoral Education, organized by Finnish Union of Researchers and Teachers, or FUURT, as we also call it ourselves. And what we are the biggest labor union in Finnish universities sector in Finland. Our members are researchers, teachers, other academic specialists, mainly working at the universities, but nowadays more and more in other sectors also. And my question for this opening is that why we as a FUURT are organizing the seminar Shaping the Future of Doctoral Education. And like I noticed that it's kind of politically correct or something. I have 5 reasons for that. First of all, like mentioned, we represent early career researchers, those who are actually doing the PhD research and planning to have the degree. And second, we also represent the supervisors of PhD research work. And third, like Khalil already mentioned, we have gathered lots of information about the situation, for example, about doctoral researchers in Finland for many years now. So I would say that we have quite of the knowledge what the current situation for PhD researchers is at the moment, or has been for a couple of years now. And fourth, we are also lobbying organization, and we have done some serious lobbying that has also led to this. So we were one of the parties who were lobbying that in Finland we really should invest for R&D and especially for education training new specialists to do research, to do development. And so here we are. We have a major investment from the Finnish government at the moment for doctoral education. And we have also a mutual goal with the Rectors' Council of Finland, Finnish Universities, UNIFI, and also with the Ministry of Education and Culture in Finland to make doctoral education in Finland even better. Like Colin mentioned, we are working very well already, but there is still time to improve, or still room to improvements. And as I understand, we have really broad, wide, and mutual understanding that we will do this together, like Colin mentioned. And some words about the program today. So first we will hear about this doctoral pilot funded by the Ministry of Education and Culture, what it's about, and so on. And then we have the panel discussion, and we will tackle doctoral education from basically 3 different aspects. First one is how the doctoral research is now funded in Finland at the moment, what it might mean on the point of view of the doctoral researcher, him or herself, what kind of problems it might have, how it will affect their work, preparing their doctoral thesis. And one particular data point from our member survey, it states that 65% of the respondents agreed with the statement, applying funding takes too much time out of research work. So 65% of those who responded agreed with this statement. The second theme addressed by the panel is the process of supervision, the importance and how does the supervision of PhD work look like from the point of view of the supervisor. Again, our surveys and 26% of the respondents in our survey states that they have discussed with the supervisor 1 to 5 times per 1 year. 1 to 5 times in a year. Is it enough? One question. And last theme is that now that we can expect that we have 1,000 more doctorates in near future, how does the career prospects of the doctorates look like in Finland right now or in the future. But maybe the most important message today we hear at the end by the PhD researcher. And I hope that he will kind of address how this discussion today seems from his point of view, what kind of expectations for the future of doctoral education in Finland this kind of highlights, or what kind of prospects it gives. So, on behalf of FUURT, welcome to this event, and I hope that we have fruitful and lively discussion today, and try to enjoy also.
Thank you very much, Tero. Big round of applause. Oh my God, it's going to be super exciting. It's going to be super exciting to see what the day would unravel, and the panel discussion is going to be something that we would all look forward to. But let's talk more of what's actually changing. What are we doing now, and what are we thinking of doing in the future? And no one can better answer that except Paavo Petri Ahonen from the Ministry of Education and Culture in Finland. Stage is yours.
Thank you, Kalle. Exciting to be here. I'm also looking forward to the panel discussion very, very much. But before that, good afternoon. On behalf of the Ministry of Education and Culture, I thank for the invitation to this doctoral education discussion event. It's very important that the researchers, teachers, science experts hear of this and can be within the discussion that has been going on in many other levels, meaning the administrational level for a year now. Must say that I'm coming from very busy headquarters of development of higher education and science policy, as there are a lot in the air at the ministry right now. On science and research policy arena, the activity largely is RDI system-related work, so the whole research, development, innovation coverage system. The Act on Research and Development Funding entered into force in the beginning of last year, and the Act is aimed at ensuring that the Finnish public spending on R&D will be increased yearly until 2030 to correspond with the 4% GDP target. The central government's R&D funding, therefore, will increase by 40% from the current level of approximately 2.5 billion euros in 23. This is a significant increase in Finnish R&D investment, but it will require comprehensive development of the Finnish RDI system and effective allocation of the funding. On higher education policy arena, if we call it separate, it's not from research, but let's call it the arena as well. The universities and the universities of applied sciences are preparing for the next funding period of 24-27. In January, the ministry launched a consultation round on amendments to the decrees on the reform of the funding models. Very important funding models for universities and universities of applied sciences. And I believe the consultation round is open until next week. Not to mention the negotiations with each one of the universities and universities of applied sciences this year. That's a big task, and it's a very important task done every 3 years. But today in this hall, we will discuss a biggest science policy investment for years, that is the Doctoral Education Pilot. So Ministry of Education and Culture has prepared a national pilot project for expanding and reforming doctoral education in close cooperation with universities. And that means that for more than a year now, we have been discussing this with universities, for mostly the vice rectors that we have met many times, not to forget other stakeholders like the research institutes that are very important research, doctoral educators in this country. But the actual sum available was not known before October. So all that negotiations for discussions for more than a year really was preparing for something that was maybe having funny. So the finalizing of the details occurred after last October. The piloting is based on the entries of the parliamentary RDI working group and the government program. Yes. And so strategically, the background lies in the parliamentary work. And it's very good that all the political parties are included in this, and they were willing to increase knowledge, increase the knowledgeable people in here. That gives a lot of safety in the coming years when the politics change. So parliamentary work behind. And government program had its entries also on researcher education. Piloting will be implemented through those increases in the funding. I mentioned the Act already. There it comes from yearly increases. But there's a very important requirement with that money. It has to go only for R&D work, research and development work. So afterwards, in the national statistics, we must have that input as R&D costs available, nothing else. And there we have gone, and we may go still deeply into the definition of what is R&D work. And it goes back to statistics, it goes back to OECD work, even to Frascati manual, define what it is. So also it means that education at large does not fit in R&D. So we cannot use this money largely to education, but PhD education, the doctoral researchers, they fall in that. And that's very lucky for this situation as well. So the increases allowed us 2,062 million euros reserved for research training pilot for this 4-year period, which is very good because there are many hands that would like to take part of that. There are many R&D activities around in the country, so very good for us that we had this activity. And we hope that a balanced division will also in the future, in the upcoming years, happen between the research and development. So objectives of the piloting was to increase the number of doctors in Finland, taking into account the security of supply of competence. So 1,000 doctors more is quite a number, it's a lot, but then again we also have to refer it to the system that is behind it. It's much and it's not excessively. The security of supply of competence means, for example, that we would like those who get funding for this to take into account that we will have, for example, people who speak national languages for higher education and administration in the higher education institutions in the future. It's very good that we have this foreign-based knowledge, very knowledgeable people here, but also we have to take sure that this system, the R&D system, can connect and discuss with the rest of the society. We want to pilot a more flexible process and content of doctoral education. That is something, flexibility, and it's something that we don't do any micromanaging from the ministry side. Those funded ones, they have to find ways to that. What are they? We've heard that, for example, publication process is a bottleneck in time-wise when you are reaching your doctoral degree. In Finland, the median age to become a doctor is 36 to 37 years. And if you think about that, the years you have left to do R&D as a doctor are fewer compared to that if you do it earlier. There are many pluses that the flexibility would be increased. We want to increase the mobility of graduates between different stakeholders, these research actors. We want to pursue diverse research careers. That is something that we have talked from the ministry more than 20 years, if not longer. We would like to have a system where a person can change from one place to another, share the experiences, share the knowledge. And sometimes it looks that, for example, coming back to academia is hard for those who have spent some time at companies, for example. This is a great time also to produce information on education processes, and this pilot gives possibility to try out different ways of doing. And we will have a special research-based project on evaluating, continuously evaluating this pilot. This pilot is a big sum of money overall, so we have to also follow that closely at the governance. One objective is to develop guidance practices so that the mindset and thinking that you can, at the bachelor's level, for example, you can already decide that maybe this researcher career is for you. And there are ways of doing it faster than not to stop after every step and look around and what should I do now, what should I do now. We know that in medical sciences, for example, they are way ahead in thinking that way already at bachelor's level. And finally, increase the employment of doctors across different sectors of society. I partly touched that already. But for an example, in the enterprises, the persons who are doing R&D work, only 7% of them are doctors. We think that it could be higher. So mindset at the doctoral research stage that maybe you will immediately go to an enterprise should be increased. So, a pilot call for doctoral education. So we are coming to a stage a few months back. We calculated that with that money available, we could fund 1,000 seats. And there was a decision made that 800 of those were allocated to the fields of the Academy of Finland's flagships and 200 to other, so that's freely chosen research fields. That was made partly because the flagships are known to have very high quality already. They are evaluated to be very valuable for the society, and they already have research education activities within those. And it was also decided in this call that the pilots are carried out by university-led consortia, not more open, and only universities could receive funding. But we were very open in the call text that partners could be from research institutes and companies, for example. That's exactly what the objectives say, to have a wide variety of chances and diversity. So the Academy of Finland facilitated for the pilot call in November, quite fast if you think that we had the decision of the funding in October, and we all know that we can trust on Academy of Finland's quality and capabilities in doing an objective evaluation. A total of 16 applications were submitted to the call for flagships fields, and a little more than 1,300 doctoral positions were applied for. So if you think about the 800 available, there were fairly good chances of having those places. The call for freely chosen research fields received almost 1,000 doctoral positions applied, and compared to this 200, of course, the competition was much harsher there. And an international panel organized by Academy Finland peer-reviewed the applications on 9th of January, so very, very fast process. And an international objective evaluation for each one of these applications. Maybe at this stage, I already mentioned that we kept hurry in this one because the funding came quite late compared to this year that we have to use a part of that money, and we wanted to have universities to have a chance to start recruiting the doctoral researchers until next fall as soon as possible. Yeah, the right slide. So, based on the applications received, the ministry decided to grant a total of 255 million euros for piloting this doctoral education in this time period. And those ones of you who remember this 262 and now 255 out can calculate that 7 million is still available. A part of that goes to the evaluation project that Ella already mentioned, but we have to think out what to do with the rest. The sum corresponds to full salary, supervising costs, and research costs of 1,000 doctoral research for 3 years. The calculation quantum was 85,000 euros per year per doctoral researcher. And that is an amount that is not completely made by us at the ministry. With the discussions with the universities, there was an agreement, and actually this is a number that they already gave us to a quite early stage. Supervising costs there included, but we must remember that those must be R&D costs, according to the act that I mentioned. So not something else, but supervising is also doing research in this case largely. Very, very importantly, we want to say that the funding decisions at the ministry were made on the basis of the reviews of the evaluation panel. So based on the rating and ranking that this international objective panel gave us. So there was no policy-based overall consideration in this case that we very often do at the ministry, and we have to do. But this is based on the open competition, and the result is based on the rating and ranking. Here are the decisions for the pilots in the flagship sector. This is openly available also in our webpage, ministry's webpage. 9 of them funded, some of them quite a lot of doctoral researchers included, but they applied this, and we didn't cut there from there. Which one was funded? Was funded fully, almost fully. Only minor changes there for the reason that we had to reach the 800 here and not more. There has been a lot of discussion afterwards. We've heard about the scientific disciplines, how they are not equally here. We also believe that within the flagships, although they fall into a certain research field by name, they are multidisciplinary by nature. So there are a lot of possibilities also within the flagships for several other disciplines as well. Recruiting will be quite a task for some We see that, we can agree on that, but that was applied for, and we believe that the applicants can fulfill what they applied for. The next one is on the other 200 places with a much harsher competition and based on the rating and ranking. So I want to not to put too much concentration of the fact of the university-specific part, but for openness, of course, it has to be shown out here. Even though this was a full competition of doctoral education plan and innovation, so in a way, we are interested and made this comparison to PhD graduates annually per university. And within certain limits, this also has a clear reference to that. So we are not too unhappy about the situation, although of course you can make many calculations, kind of who earns what. But this was a competition. This was an open competition, I have to say. And how much time do I have? Not much. Maybe I stop here. Just a few angles that have been considered and heard later on. I put these up yesterday. If you think about these 1,000 doctoral researchers in the pilot, temporary doctoral researcher places, and compare it to the almost 20,000 registered PhD students, there's a huge difference. So we would like to very much underline that this is a pilot. This is not a reform from the ministry. Only the science community and practically universities have the autonomy and power. The autonomy and power to make a reform. But this pilot maybe gives ways and examples in some of those field-related pilots. Another number is that more than 1,600 PhDs annually are graduated in Finland, versus this 1,000 maybe within 2 years frame. There's a clear bottom line there that this goes on top. And maybe in the future, in the statistics, we will see a bump here. We will see it only after that, thinking about recruiting the persons here. So this is a pilot in that sense as well. One question I've received is that, is there a side effect on the relative division in resources to the fields of study in the universities? So is there a plan to give more in the future to some? And no, we don't think so at all. 2 billion euros annually public funding to universities versus 255 within 4 years. There's a huge difference. We don't believe that this has any kind of education reform effect. But at the ministry, we are very happy and proud of the fact that the increasing national R&D funding can be directed to the important doctoral education. It's something that we are very happy about. It's overall the one possibility to convey R&D funding in education. We are aware of some of the criticism to the pilot and its organization, but also we've seen a big amount of positive feedback. Thank you very much, Finnish Union of University Researchers and Teachers. This is an important event here today, and it's very important that researchers, teachers, and academic experts can be involved in the discussion, and that is something I said already before in the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Paavo Petri. It's time for discussions. Does anyone here have any questions? And by the way, we have around 120 people who are with us online today. So, hello guys who are online. And I think some of the people online have questions. So how do people here physically? Yes. We're now 1 against 1, online plus physical. It's right there.
Thank you very much. I'm Sanna Turoma. I hold a title of docent at this university, but I'm actually a professor at Tampere University, where I'm also in charge of doctoral program in language studies. And I would like to go back to your the comments you made in the beginning of your talk. And actually, before I make this question, I would like to congratulate all those flagship projects that got these new study places, and I would like to thank you for your talk. But yes, your question, my question concerns the comment that you made in the beginning of your talk that concerned the connection between the security of supply of competence and languages. And this is huoltovarmuuden ja kielikompetenssin välinen yhteys. And my question is, before I get to my question, I also want to sort of give a little bit of background to this. The knowledge of languages and linguistic competence obviously has to do with the kind of knowledge that the humanities in general can offer. And perhaps ihmistieteet is the right term in Finnish. And I would like to ask you, when we look at the decisions that you have just made, or the ministry has just made, how do you see that these flagship projects actually, let's turn it this way, how do you think that the humanities benefit from these decisions? And I would like to actually hear you citing some concrete examples of these decisions that you see as being beneficial to the humanities. And I'm coming from two places, not only from the fact that I represent a doctoral program in language studies, and I have this kind of what I would call a rather broad background in the humanities myself, but also from the place that since this is a pilot, in order to analyze any results of a pilot, surely you need to have a widespread take on the, or you have to be able to use examples from the scholarly fields and academic fields and scientific fields that are practiced in this country at large. I hope my question made sense. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It's a long one. I try to remember it well. So this security of osaamisen huoltovarmuus it's in Finnish that you asked. Yes, it's something that it's a bit hard to explain what it really is. But for example, there are certain fields in that need experts, enough experts, and that has to be assured. But on the other hand, when this pilot cohort was announced out, then we didn't touch at the result anymore. It was, as I said, on the rating and ranking. So the pilot call was designed so that the flagships were very much involved and all others were like in the competition. There was no policy-related thinking afterwards when we saw that. It's a totally different play if we try to assure each and one of those. I understand your problem or your like. What is that? Concern is the word that I was looking for in that one. But yeah, I think I have to go behind that. It was really a competition, and it was a very open process, and the call was as it was.
You're not able to cite any concrete examples of the projects that were funded that would actually be beneficial to the humanities and social sciences?
No, I didn't check already for that for this purpose, but my guess is that I would find an example. Sorry.
Any more questions? Yes.
Thanks. I'm part of a few European consortiums, which are not that big, maybe 10 to 30 million euros. And for those consortiums, we always hire new doctoral students or even senior researchers. But typically these consortia, even these small funded ones, they take up to a year to select and assess. So this was a bit surprising, that this is almost €250 million and less than 2 weeks, or it's under 4 weeks in assessment. So I would like to know, how was this done? It sounds quite fascinating if it was done in such a breakthrough pace.
Yeah, that's a good question of the challenge. Only a part of those doctoral positions start on next fall, and part of them start in January. Most of them probably start in January. And that is something that we are not micromanaging in a way. It's a challenge, but everybody who participated in the call had this information available. So it's really, we are looking forward it to be done.
We got 2 questions also from people who are online, and I gotta say that these questions and these concerns are very important, because that's how we would hand-in-hand shape the future. So if Mary can tell us what were the questions that were online. And
Thank you. There is one set of questions, especially for the research costs. So if you can elaborate a little bit, what means that research costs are covered? So what kind of costs, for example, project or material cost on top of the PhD researcher's salary plus supervision? There was an example that PhD project research material costs without salary for a 3-year project in biomedical research are around 30,000 to 50,000 euros. Can these be covered with the pilot funding?
Yes, thank you. So it's a lump sum of 85,000 per researcher per year. And we don't define exactly what can be included. We said that there's a full salary, there are research costs, there are supervision costs. And they all have to be R&D costs into the bottom line. But no other requirements from our side. But of course we will ask for reports that it's really R&D cost that it is. But not, once again, I use this word micromanaging. We don't go into that detail from the ministry at all.
Thank you. And well, in general, there is, of course, discussion and questions on the time frame of 3 years and what can be included and how. This is perhaps the topic for the panelists more. What can be done, how many publications, etc., how other doctoral studies are conducted within the 3-year time frame. But there is an interesting message on the recruitment process and the time frame for the recruitment, so starting either August 1st this year or January 2025. And there is one participant who wonders about the time frame, that the August comes too soon for her, and the January would mean that she needs to wait in kind of a limbo for several months. So how would you comment on the time frame of the recruitment process, and is there any flexibility in the starting dates for the employment contracts? Thank you.
No. The call said it as call was written as it was written, and it has to be like it is the basis. It was the basis for the evaluation. It's the basis for the decisions, and it has to be followed up in those dates. Unfortunately, of course, for single persons, but I don't know what to respond, especially to that. 3 years salary, full salary is covered, and that's already quite a lot of the whole PhD project.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paavo-Petri, for your talk, and thank you for everyone who asked the questions, and Mary also for sharing the questions of the people who were with us online. It's time for our panel discussion. Let's give Paavo a big round of applause. And in the panel discussion, we're going to be going one topic at a time. We would have a short talk on the topic of funding when it comes to doctoral education, and then we move on to career prospects and supervision. And we got panelists from different areas, people who are involved in the national level, people who are involved in the managerial positions in universities, and also people who are researchers themselves. So let me invite the panelists. Annu Pertunen, who is the chair of Doctoral Education Development Working Group from UNIFI. And we give her a big round of applause. We got Pauli Väisänen, and he's the vice chair of Finnish Union of University Researchers and Teachers. Pauli. And we got Adam Smale, professor and dean of School of Management at the University of Vasa. Give her a big round of applause. Yes, it's going to be exciting. And maybe before we move on to the topics and talking about and hearing the short talk and then having a chat about it, I'd love to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. Tell us what are your thoughts and the things that are on your mind. Annu?
Hello, good afternoon all. So my name is Annu Pertunen. I come from the University of Oulu. I'm director of the University of Oulu Graduate School. But today I'm representing the UNIFI's Doctoral Education Development Work Group. So I'm really happy to be here today because the task of that working group is to make a report, or not report, but recommendations on how to improve the doctoral education in Finland. And it's really important to hear your voice, hear the university's opinions, how to do it. So these kind of events are highly important. So thank you for arranging it, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. And Pauli, you're a postdoc researcher, so what are your thoughts?
Hey, I'm Pauli Väisänen. I have a PhD in space physics from the University of Oulu. Currently, I'm moving to do my postdoc in Italy, in Istituto Nazionale Fisica Nucleare in Perugia for about half a year more. And during my doctoral researcher career, and also before that, I have been very active in different working groups at the university, the university board, and also the union at one point. And kind of my view has always been that if there's some problem, I would want to fix it, and I want to tell people that should be fixed. And at the university and doctoral education, there are some of such things that could be fixed and made better. And I think one topic I always like to discuss is that kind of we're now discussing on like Finnish level about this doctoral education, but the work itself, the doctoral training and the people working are in the research groups, in the very grassroots, who have the autonomy to do it themselves. And the fields are vastly different, so we need to kind of combine and interlock these different levels of discussion together, that we cannot forget the grassroots researchers themselves.
Yes, definitely. It's a quite important thing to consider. The people who are actually doing the groundwork, like you said. And Adam, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, hi everyone. Adam Smale. I came to Finland 20 years ago, almost to the day, to start my PhD studies. And I did them in 3.5 years, so I don't know what all the fuss is about. I also then became a professor later on and supervised PhD students of my own. And now as a dean, I'm supervising the supervisors, one of whom was my PhD supervisor, so that's an interesting situation. Really pleased to see Finland put so much money in RDI. Our management team was in Brussels a couple of weeks ago, and I think this news has made waves through European commissions and saying in terms of regional development and strengthening the RDI power of Finland, this could be a really smart move. But you know, I'm also a professor of management, and it's all about the implementation. So very interested to be part of a discussion on how to work this out.
It's going to be exciting. We're going to move on to the first topic, and Tero, again, would be talking about funding and how funding is going to be different now and later with this pilot project. Let's do it.
Thank you, Kalle. Just a few data points about the funding of the PhD research work nowadays. Or will you move it forward? Yeah. So we have basically a very good variety of different funding sources for research in Finland. And basically it's a very good thing, but when we take a look of the funding from the PhD researchers' work, it might not seem that only positive anymore. So here is the data from our latest member surveys, and as we can see, there are lots of different sources to fund PhD research in Finland. Altogether, roughly half of the PhD researchers state that they have mainly been employed during their PhD research work, but also the foundations with personal grants are also a big source to fund PhD research. And also there is still room for people who are doing their research more or less like a hobby or something like that. And also we know that, for example, in Sweden, all the research for PhD is done in employment relationship. And our survey for early career researchers show that more than 1/3 of a PhD researchers has at least 4 different funding sources during their PhD research period. And like mentioned in the opening words, applying funding, although it's a very good ability to master during the research career, but it seems like that it takes too much time out of the PhD research work during the early career research. And also our survey to early career researchers show that more than 1/3 of as much as 30% of the PhD candidates have been unemployed during their work towards their doctoral thesis. And one question that I may raise here is that should it be more of a risk for the organization to fund PhD research than for the individual, him or herself? And lastly, about the funding, one reasoning that was already kind of raised up behind this development of doctoral education is that the fact that the time for completing the dissertation is somewhat more than the expected 4 years. And we as a union have a reason to believe that fragmentation of funding is one part of this kind of problem. And maybe the question in here is that could the funding and employment for the whole period of PhD research be one part of the solution to finish PhD research in expected time? And now I'm eager to hear the discussion.
Thank you very much, Tero. Thank you, thank you. Maybe we'll start with Pauli. How was your experience when you were a PhD student, let's say, or an early career researcher, and when it came to funding, or maybe your colleagues?
Yeah, I think I was part of the kind of lucky group that I mostly had a working contract, but I also had a few grants which I combined with the work, and it was quite flexible. And I think you can see from those slides that the fields that have the most contracts and maybe longer contracts, natural sciences and technology and engineering, they are the fastest. And I think this is, every time we do such a survey, it's like reiterated that the same result. And I think this kind of new pilot money that is continuous funding for 3 years for so many people, I think it will help already through that, not only that the three year is kind of aimed for, but also that they have the contracts for the full time. But
Yes.
what happens is also what happens after the 3 years. I think that's very crucial. Will the universities or groups say that you're on your own now, apply for grants, or go on unemployment benefit or something like that, or will they stand up and say that, okay, we will see this through and we will offer support and so on, that you get through that? I think that will be very important in 3 years' time. Which universities will do what?
That's a quite nice point. So you're ensuring that the whole process of research would go stress-free for 3 years, and then after that, all of a sudden, all the stress is gonna kick in. And that's a very nice perspective to also look into what's happening after that and what's the next step. On a managerial position, Adam, what do you think? How is the funding going to affect, for example, let's say your students or?
Yeah, I think we'd all agree if we think about the doctoral pilot. If we're about to recruit 1,000 doctoral students, we're in a war for talent. We don't just want any 1,000, we want the best. And they've probably got a choice. If they're any good at what they do, they've got choice. And so what are we doing to make sure that studying a PhD, however we now define this in the doctoral pilot, is the best choice that they could make? What's on offer? What's our value proposition? And I think a good move is to at least have money on the table at the beginning. You know, now it might not be the best salary they've ever seen. You know, we might have to then play around with that and say, well, in certain fields, we might be competing with industry. For students that have just finished their master's degree and have studied for 5 years, even studying for 3 years instead of 4 is still an outrageous idea. I need to pay off my student loans. So how are you going to convince them to do a PhD? And I think in order to attract the best talent, it certainly helps if you move the funding for doctoral researchers to the beginning of the contract and say, we have something very concrete to offer you. Then what you can do, especially if you allocate this funding to certain teams, is you can say, well, it's not just a question of now apply to a graduate school. It's apply to this team, to this professor, who, by the way, is the leading professor in whatever it is. Come and work for this great team. This is how we work. It's like a job application. It's not an application to a graduate school. And that can be very powerful in attracting the kind of people you want to come and work with you. And so I very much look at funding in terms of the very, very first question, which is, why would they come and do a PhD with you in the first place? And it's a competition.
Beautiful said. So you're saying that it will also ensure the quality of the work, because it's going to be super competitive, that the really good ones would be attracted, and they would be given the guarantee that, okay, you don't need to worry, and you would.
Yeah.
You would
Put it this way: in the past, what would happen is you'd identify a really bright potential doctoral student, and then they'd ask that question you hope they wouldn't ask, which is, what about funding? Mm-hmm. And then you'd say, it's complicated. We'll see if we can get you started on something. And I started on repetitive 6-month contracts.
Yes.
I couldn't get a credit card when I first started. You know, I was British and had a 6-month contract, and I got laughed out the bank. By securing funding earlier on, that's something you can offer them straight away that pulls them away from whatever else they were thinking that they might do. It might not be that you can fund them all the way to the end, but after 3 years, it's going to be a lot easier to get grants and scholarships because you've got a track record. You've done your studies, you've got experience, you've maybe published something, you've presented your work in conferences. What you're asking for then is, please fund the last few months of my PhD. And that's a lot easier to give money to for a foundation than, I've only just started, help me out here because the university's run out of money. And then what kind of people can you expect that would take that value proposition?
Yes, yes, yes.
And if you want to recruit people from outside of Finland who may want to relocate with their families, yeah?
So definitely, funding would be a nice value proposition to attract.
Oh, it's not just nice, it's fundamental.
It's fundamental.
They don't move anywhere unless you're offering them something.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good point. And Annu, let's say on a national level, how can we ensure like the points that Adam and Pauli mentioned, and also Tero mentioned, would be actually implemented and make sure that this happens. So.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if I'm the person who can tell you how can we make sure of it. But it's true that the funding is a big issue. We know from the experience and from the studies that the funding is a great barrier for our doctoral researchers. And even though we do have this diversity in funding mechanism, which can be also good possibility for our doctoral researchers, it's still a fact that it takes way too much time for our doctoral researchers to apply for funding. And we can also see that it's one skill for the doctoral research to know how to apply for the funding, but still it shouldn't take too much time. And it's also, I think it's a fact that, and it will be a fact that there isn't ever enough funding. We will always ask for more.
True.
So that's why I would like to people to think about how to maximize the impact of available funding. So when we have funding, how to make the doctoral training process, doctoral education, so effective that it's impactful for the doctoral researcher himself, or for the organization, or for the society. So that's I find critical. And related to that, I think it's also a matter of the expectations that we have for the doctoral researchers and for the doctoral research. So do we expect them to do a bit too much? Is there something that should we consider the requirements that we have for the doctoral researchers at the moment regarding the study credits or the requirements of thesis? I'm not sure, I'm just asking.
Those are very nice questions. And you said it very nicely, the way that funding would never be enough. Funding would never be enough, and how we can actually improve the impact of the available fundings that we have, and have that impact on the lives of researchers, and also eventually having the impact on society. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Maybe it's louder. Thanks. Thanks, FUURT and Tero, because I think FUURT puts out these really good reports on how many PhDs have graduated and what the doctoral researchers really feel. So, Adam, you made a very interesting point, because I think from FUURT's last report, annually 1,600, the last batch of PhD graduates, and less than 7% were hired by industry. And I'm one of those industry members. For the past 2 years, for 4 PhDs, 140 PhD graduates were interviewed, and only 2 from Finland were hired. So, Adam, this hiring 1,000 more PhDs, 3 years, given that previously people who had done it in 6 years couldn't do it, is this going to solve the problem? Or what's the strategy there? To get more PhDs, give them half the time, and then the 7% number will go up? Or what's the thinking behind it?
I think that the way to answer that question is with another question, which is doing a PhD for what? Yeah, so the doctoral pilot is about doing a PhD to support research, development, and innovation. Okay, the PhDs that we're familiar, the ones are about basic science and about preparing you for an academic career. And so when you think that, well, how long is long enough? Yeah, the answer is, well, long enough for what? Is it long enough for a career in an expert role in industry? Does that require you to be able to publish in an academic journal article? That's maybe not what your future employer is looking for, but it's expert analytical skills and maybe also some transferable skills, which then doctoral education has to provide you with. I think there's, of course, a danger that we're talking about a two-tier or a dual system for doctors. You've got one that prepares you for an academic career and one prepares you for industry. And we'd say, well, do you need the same competencies for both? And most would agree no. There's some overlap, but there are some very different competencies that you need. So I think the other thing I would say, we risk overgeneralizing across disciplines. There are huge differences between disciplines. We tend to approach this issue from our own discipline, that's what we know. So 3 years in business studies might be okay, 3 years in some fields of technology maybe not, 3 years in medicine, very difficult to imagine. And that goes down to the nature of the research work, the nature of supervision, how fast does it take you to publish results. Business studies, doctoral students work with industry year in, year out. This is nothing new. In industry, you have the industrial PhD. Aalto sells the Doctoral of Business Administration, the DBA, for years. You know, some of this isn't new, actually, but it is for certain disciplines. And so I think the way to approach the issue 3 years versus 6 years is by discipline, but it's fundamentally about what are they doing the PhD for? What is it preparing them for? Then we can say, well, is it possible or not?
Thank you, Adam, and thank you for the question. And what you said is actually setting the foundation for our next topic, which is supervision. And we're going to have Professor Mikko Jakonen, Professor of Social and Public Policy from the University of Eastern Finland, to give us a short talk. Thank you, Mikko. Welcome on the stage. Give him a big round of applause, guys. Let's go.
Hello, everyone, and short talk, hopefully. I have lots of questions, and perhaps I'm repeating what has been said already. But so I will begin with the 3 things that I see important in doctoral research, and they are funding, as I said already, time and supervision. So I will try to get to supervision. First of all, what funding? It's a crucial resource for doctoral research to get a salary or a grant for the whole period of doctoral research. And I think this applies not only for this pilot, but in general. And secondly, doctoral researchers also need resources to offer them possibility for a proper academic activity, like have a workspace, ability to travel to conferences, do field work and collect data, for example. And I see that universities should basically provide these resources, since they get all the money from the doctoral degrees as well. But still, as we know, many doctoral researchers live with uncertainty of funding, as we know. So now, related to this 3-year doctoral pilot, I have a question, and I'm worried about who provides the funding after the 3-year pilot is over, as has been said already. So if the doctoral thesis is not ready, who provides the funding after that? And is there a danger that this pilot even brings more precarity to the universities? And what happens especially for the people who are coming to Finland from abroad to do their PhD studies in Finland? What happens after 3-year funding? Now, secondly, the question of time. So it is obvious that doing research takes time, and learning to do research takes even more time. But however, I would like to state that learning research skills is not only about learning to publish academic articles, which a 3-year period of doing PhD really pushes forward. So there must be enough time and space for other academic work and activities as well. So again, related to the 3-year doctoral pilot, my question is, what elements of academic expertise is cut out from the 3-year doctoral school? Do doctoral researchers have time for teaching, for example, grant writing, data collection, visits to the foreign universities, and so on? So in other words, what do we see as important academic experience or competence in the future? And thirdly, about supervision. So especially with the tightening resources, tightening time resources, supervision begins to play even more crucial role than before. So doctoral researchers should be provided with a clear and reliable supervision process throughout the doctoral phase. And my question is, what belongs to this supervision process and what does not belong? Do we have any guidelines for this at the moment? And this leads to a more general question about how do we resource the doctoral supervision in universities. And I have 3 questions again for this, so lots of questions. So
you're making my job easy, so it's good.
Yeah, but 3 questions related to this. Do we have enough resources for doctoral supervision? So first one is, in general way, is supervision resourced enough by the universities? So how is doctoral supervision taken into account in the work plans, for example? Another thing, do we even know at the moment how much time we spent on supervision? So I haven't seen any data for this, but perhaps I'm stupid, but still I have to check that out. But I'm asking, do we know at the moment how much we spend time for supervision? Secondly, the broader question I would like to open up is about, by asking, is supervision of the doctoral research acknowledged enough as an academic merit? So it is, of course, that we love science and we do many things for the love of science, but still our progress in academic career is based on certain products, such as scientific articles and funding. And at the moment, supervising a doctoral thesis is not counted as equal with this. So there's a problem, I think, with this. It's not considered as a merit, which should be spent with the university lecturer, for example, would spend time with. So thirdly, and lastly, I want to ask what kind of skills and expertise we demand from the supervisors in the future. So at the moment, academic professionals can give good academic supervision in academic issues, but how about the other skills related to the broader professional life and carry outside the universities? Are we really capable of giving this kind of supervision at the moment? And then last, words about the changing academic culture. So it is quite obvious that this kind of massive 3-year pilot for doctoral research is changing the academic culture, and it is changing it quite rapidly. Of course, it's limited, but still it affects to the whole university system. So we must recognize that for some fields, as has been said already, it fits more easily than the others, but we don't want these kind of unwanted side effects for the disciplines who cannot turn their research process towards this new model as quickly as demanded. And since the 3-year doctoral education is very tight and demanding aim, we must make sure that doctoral researchers do not drop out due to this tight time limit, and if they do, we must catch them up, and how do we catch them up? So as been said already, we must make sure that in 5 or 10 years, the doctoral research career is tempting for young people in universities, because this new pilot is shaping the idea of what is to be a doctoral researcher in the universities. So I would say that all this boils down to the supervision, that we must develop supervision culture in the universities, and perhaps one way of doing this is give more recognition to the doctoral supervision in the academic world. So this way, perhaps we can get better supervision in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mikko. Very important thoughts and questions, and I would say constructive comments. I personally was very lucky when it came to my PhD supervisor, Timo Narhi. He really carefully and skillfully guided me and led me. And when Tara was saying that the average is 1 or twice a year meeting with the supervisor, I had meetings almost every week, and I was quite shocked. But back to our panelists. Any thoughts on Mikko's questions and talks?
I can answer with more questions that also. Who will provide the supervision? Is it only the leading professor in the field, or will this supervision kind of load will also be given to senior researchers, university lecturers, postdoctoral researchers, and so on? And will they get support for that role? Because also for supervision, you need some training and guidance. Is it only that you learn it on the job, or will you get some support from the university for that? And also, well, there's often discussion, should there be supervisors from outside the university, and probably sometimes there are, but it's also a matter of resources that if we want someone from a company to supervise, what will they get out of it, and when they spend their time and resources on it. So you shouldn't have it like as a free job, but the supervisors, whatever level or whether from there, should kind of gain something from it, not just based on altruism, what they do.
Exactly. And what about Annu? What's your thoughts on what Mikko and Pauli and the topic of supervision when it comes to this pilot?
Yeah, supervision is crucial. That's a fact as well, as crucial as funding. The supervision relationship is important. It lasts for years. There are up and downs, and in most cases, both supervisor and the doctoral researcher, they are doing their best, and it's really good. But I agree with Mikko in that now the merits are given only by the end product, by the object, by the thesis. When the thesis is ready, then the reward comes. But we should concentrate more on the process. And from the supervisor point of view, there are lots of processes to handle. You need to know the subject, you need to know the methods, you need to supervise the research, you need to supervise the career building, recommend the general courses, and try to evaluate what skills needs to be improved. So there are lots of processes to handle for supervisors, and it's a demanding task. And I know that it is done very well, especially thinking that there are lots of other responsibilities for supervisors. Even though we seem to ask more and more from the supervisors, and I just would like to share the thought that it's not the principal supervisor's responsibility only. There are lots of colleagues in which to rely on. So supervision should be thinking of a more systematic, or not systematic, but communal way, that there is a big community in supporting doctoral researchers. There are people who could concentrate on supervision. There are different ways of do the counseling or guiding, having the more systematic or structured way of moving in a doctoral training path. So there are lots of things. There are lots of people around
who can answer these questions and set exam. And I think Adam could answer most of these questions, or at least some, because you just said you're supervising your supervisor right now.
I think the starting point, and if we bring this back, for example, to the doctoral pilot, it's not only about innovation in the terms of that these researchers will be doing RDI and innovation activities. It's about innovating the doctoral education and supervision system itself. So the question we should be asking is, when we look at the doctoral pilot, that has a heavy emphasis on preparing doctoral researchers for a non-academic career, what do they need? What do they need in the program? What do they need in terms of supervision? And what is it that supervisors are doing when they supervise? Okay, so if you'd say, okay, well, in order to transition into a non-academic career, what is it that your first supervisor, your professor, can do? And what is it that they can't do? Yeah? What you might need is a career mentor. Okay, and who does that? Well, it could be someone from industry if that's where you're headed. Yeah? What about your emotional support? Well, that might be a bit much to ask of a supervisor. I mean, think of all the roles that we're adding, right? So you've got to be a critical reviewer, you have to be a friend, you have to be a co-author, you have to be there with tissues. Can the same person do all of those things equally effectively? No. I like the analogy that parents don't raise children, it's a community. In the same way with doctoral researchers, right? The research group, the fellow doctoral students they're studying next to, their supervisor, their mentor, they can draw from many different supervisory resources during the process, but they still come back to the fundamental question, which is if we think that we've kind of done a pretty good job at how to supervise a PhD towards an academic career, the bit we haven't cracked yet is how do we supervise a PhD for a non-academic career? Yeah, and if you read some of the applications that got funding, they're innovating around having supervisory teams which include people that will advise in a very much career mentoring type way how to be able to apply your scientific knowledge in industry and organizations, whether this is private organizations, public sector, third sector. And by the way, how are we going to get you into these expert roles, working as experts? 1,000 extra doctoral students, there's no capacity in Finnish universities for academic careers. Mm-hmm. By definition, it has to be a non-academic career, right? So what's the plan? And what I like about the doctoral pilot is that it forces us to think like this. And it doesn't matter perhaps at the moment if we don't have all the answers. We've got to be asking the right questions.
Thank you very much. So it's just like any other research, setting the questions right, the hypothesis right, and then aiming for what the results would say. You had a point that you wanted to add on.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that I was just the other day listening to Professor Sanna Vehviläinen from the University of Eastern Finland, and she was talking about it in a way that it takes a village to supervise the doctoral researcher, and that was a good thing. And it's just that the main issue was that don't assume anything. The doctoral researchers nowadays, they have different kind of paths. Discuss with the doctoral researcher, and that helps you quite a lot in supervising.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much for sharing your points. Yes, you want to add?
Yeah, maybe one comment about supervision and kind of preparing for non-academic career. I also think that this is probably field dependent, but also the kind of the meat in the doctoral degree is that it's kind of a gateway to the academic scientific world, that it also needs to be an emphasis in any way, and it's where the companies will get the bonus, that they will have this contact who can reach the higher academic and scientific knowledge. So I think that needs to be somehow integrated. Yes. That not only the career mentoring will help, but it's also essential, of course.
Thank you all. Wow, exciting talks and exciting discussions. But again, all these discussions setting the ground for our next topic, which is going to focus on career prospects. And just like Adam also mentioned, like 1,000 people in academia, we don't have space for them. So are they going to industry? What could different career prospects be? And Meri Jalonen would share her thoughts. She's the chief specialist from Lab Uni of Applied Sciences. Stage is yours. Give her a big round of applause, guys.
Dear panelists, dear audience, some 15 years ago, when I was working as a project researcher and looking for a topic for my PhD project, academic career prospects seemed quite vague. There were a couple of professors and lecturers in the unit, while researchers, both PhDs, holders and graduates, were working on projects and applying for funding. In fact, I remember how a postdoc fellow surprised us junior scholars when he announced his career goal, to become a professor. To us, a professorship looked like a highly improbable and pretty unattractive career choice at the time. Well, things have changed over the past decade, and today our junior colleagues may foresee various career paths. For instance, one may find an interesting job, and even a permanent one, at the University of Applied Sciences, which was a new opportunity for myself only 3 years ago. However, the career paths can take many turns, involve unemployment breaks, and be characterized by uncertainty. I'd like to give some reflections on PhD careers both in academia and outside. As the panelists already have pointed out, science is not a national endeavor, and for many PhD holders, the academic job market is truly international. Finnish science and education policies, even the future of our welfare state, rely heavily on attracting and retaining international students and scholars in Finland. So far, Finnish universities have been better at recruiting international talent than ensuring that highly educated people would have long-term employment in Finland. In my experience, scholars and other professionals are more likely to stay here the longer they have lived in the country and the stronger social bonds they have developed. For those who wish to stay, there's something more to care for than just a degree or a job. Yet those commitments don't make a smoother career path and may even make you question to what extent the demands of an academic career are reasonable and fair. Well, how about moving to the private sector after the PhD then, like the aims of the pilot, doctoral training pilot are? Finnish research, development and innovation policy places high hopes for a considerable increase in the share of PhD holders in RDI employees in the industry from 7 to 15%. Some 5 years ago, as the chart shows, about 1/4 of employed PhD holders, grant researchers are probably not part of these numbers, worked in the private sector. While early career researchers seem to be more interested in private sector jobs than before, as some of the FUURT surveys show, university-industry collaboration has been in decline over the past decade. At the same time, according to my own observations, research work in disciplines with a long tradition of industry collaboration, such as engineering, has become more academic and publication-oriented. This suggests that the threshold of recruiting scholars to the private sector may be higher than expected for both parties. Could the public sector offer a meager but stable income for a PhD? I suppose the high share of PhD holders working in the private sector has to do with professionals working in social and healthcare. Considering the social and environmental challenges we are facing, I believe that the public sector would greatly benefit from employing scholars who are able to translate research insights into actionable knowledge for societal decision-making, both in municipalities and government ministries. We already have funding instruments such as innovation ecosystem contracts and EU missions that encourage collaboration between cities and universities. Improving the capability of policymakers and civil servants to utilize research-based knowledge could be enhanced if the collaboration extended beyond joint projects. So I'd like the panelists to ponder on how we can build long-term career prospects for PhDs in Finland. Could career options be part of the supervision, as Adam just pointed out? And how university career services could better aid PhDs navigate their career path? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. Well, what are your thoughts, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, an absolutely fundamental question, right? Because this is what it's all about. Education is for something. It's preparing you for something. Just looking at the chart there, I mean, of course, the fundamental question we should be asking when we look at the statistics, when we look at what might be a KPI, a key performance or indicator for the doctoral pilots, well, it would be, have you landed a job that matches the level of your education in the area of expertise for which you were trained? Yeah? Whether you're employed or not doesn't necessarily say what kind of job it is, whether a doctoral degree has given you an advantage over a master's graduate, and it might be in a completely different field because you weren't competent enough to get one in your own field. You know, so we've got to make sure we're looking at the right kind of data to be able to draw the right kind of conclusions. But for sure, I think the career discussion should start early, but it needs to be ongoing. I'm sure you can identify that for anyone that did a PhD, it maybe didn't occur to you, you know, like an epiphany that I'm going to do an academic career now. It's something that maybe taps you on the shoulder, or maybe someone encourages you, or you get some good feedback. It's something that reveals itself over time. And that's at that point you'd say, right, well, what should I be focusing on the next few months and years, because I think that's the career for me. Same thing with a non-academic career. You know, you might have situations where the doctoral candidate thinks that they are lining up for an academic career and the supervisor doesn't think so. What I witness perhaps as a dean is that, and the research also shows this in career studies as well, there's a lot of research on the careers of academics. And unfortunately, your fate is tied quite closely to who your supervisor was. Because you get into certain behaviors, certain practices, you might be supervised by a great supervisor that teaches you the rules of the game and how to make it in academia. And another supervisor might not. They each have their own strengths and weaknesses, but when you're a doctoral student, you don't know which one you've got. Maybe until it's a little bit too late. So I think part of supervision and then career planning is also about getting second opinion, third opinion, getting a mentor that's not your supervisor, choosing a step ahead mentor, we would call them, which is think about the career that you're interested in, speak to someone that's 2 or 3 years ahead of you on that career path, ask them what it takes, what's it like, what it's really like. And I think career development should be an ongoing discussion, not just with your supervisor, but with those around you that can tell you how it really is. And it might not always be comfortable listening, and you need to choose your advice networks well. But I very much agree with the presenter that I think university career services could play a key role here. When we come back to the resourcing question, if the doctoral pilot is really successful, companies will want to pay for this. At least they'll want to sponsor it like in an industrial PhD. Why? Because they see the value. Yeah. But they would need to see value that you have been prepared for a non-academic career. Then it makes sense to them. Them, it's an easy hiring decision. What we sometimes hear is that if you've got a PhD, you're overqualified. Yeah, and it can't be that way.
That's very true.
They're not going to pay for that.
Yeah, yeah. That's very true. And very nice point, which is, again, it comes back to the group and getting different opinions, so the whole group advisors or supervisors, and then it takes also, puts the task on the early career researcher to also look one step ahead and ask, hey, how is it going to be for me in 2 years, from people who already are ahead in that path. And I would like to now ask Pauli, like you're now ahead in your path, you're a postdoctoral researcher. What kind of support systems did you wish you had as an early researcher, early career researcher when you started? Or what do you think would be additional support systems that could support anyone's path to what Adam just mentioned?
I would say that, well, of course, the supervisor and also the connections you build are quite important in the way that there's all kinds of things related to the process of the training, but also the people you meet and connect with. They probably shape the career direction you might take and what, and those are also useful wherever you go to work, that you have these contacts. One thing about the pie chart, there was this fractions of who is where, and probably the university part is getting a bit smaller, but also one point I would like to point up is that also the absolute level of the PhDs will go up, and I think that's also quite a key part. I'm just thinking, like, historically, if you think about Finland, in hundreds of years ago, if you went to school, you could be like a public administrator, and then you had to go to high school, and then the last 50 years you need to have a master's to be also in public administration and anywhere. But I think also the importance of the PhDs will, in this kind of society where everything gets more complex and we need specialists, and we also have the kind of knowledge that we can train these people, I think it will kind of increase. And hopefully with that, also the companies and also the public sector, the state and so on will start to see the importance of what more education brings. And I hope we don't ever hear that the PhD is overqualified.
Yeah, so it's a domino effect, and it would just go on and go on getting better. Adam, you had...
Yeah, I'd just like to make a reflection also, again, about the figures that were shown earlier, and we saw the employment statistics for international doctoral graduates. Of course, what wasn't included there is that that's not an insignificant number, right? Because in 2021, I think it was, of all the doctoral graduates in Finland, 30% were international. Of all the people in the University of Vaasa that have a doctoral position, 60% are international. Let's imagine that the doctoral pilot, for the sake of argument, that of those 1,000 researchers, 750 will be international. Now let's ask the question again. What kind of supervision do they need? What kind of support will they need to get employment outside of academia? Okay, well, what's the role of language? How easy is it to work with stakeholders for international doctoral students who haven't yet learned Finnish? What is their ability level to impact society and engage in societal discourse about whether it's climate change or digitalization? Now, in certain pockets of industry, this is not a problem. You can work with big multinationals and they say, well, we all speak English anyway. If you're working with small and medium-sized companies, if you're working with public sector bodies, how does that work? So what kind of supervision, what kind of career preparation will 750 of these 1,000 doctoral researchers need? And that puts a different complexion on it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Annu, would you like to add your perspective to this?
Yeah, well, career planning is, for the doctoral researchers, important, and as Adam pointed out, it has to be started already from the beginning. I heard that there are universities who actually expose doctoral researchers for the industry representatives already in the orientation week. So that might set up a bit different mindsetting already to your doctoral education than we have used to. I think as in the last 10 years, there has been a lot of talk related to this work relevance in bachelor's and master's degrees and studies, and I do believe that also in doctoral training this has been a discussion already for years now. But still, I would challenge all the doctoral programs, not only the pilot ones, but all the doctoral programs to think about the possible ways of interacting more with the industry and research institutes and other organizations. I strongly believe that would be beneficial for the doctoral researchers' career planning and also their identity building. And I would also recommend of all the fields to think about their research results already from the industry point of view, how it could be beneficial for the industry. Yes. Not only the fields of engineering, but all the fields.
Exactly. I mean, in any case, all the research that we do would translate into society, and we wanted to actually impact everyone's life. What about the audience present here and also online, perhaps? Any thoughts and any concerns and questions? Yes? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Hanne Appelqvist. I'm the director of the Helsinki Collegium for Advanced Studies. The topic today has been how to improve doctoral training in Finland. And here we are discussing the role of the doctoral training pilot as an instrument for that. Now, my question concerns the criteria for improvement. So I would like to hear the panelists' opinions on what the criteria for such an improvement are. The number of doctoral degrees has already been mentioned, as well as the usefulness for the society at large, as well as industry in specific. But what about then the academic expertise of these doctoral candidates or to become doctors? their theoretical understanding of their field, their ability to compete in that international context of the academia that was mentioned by a previous speaker, because the borders of the academia are not the borders of Finland, but this is, as you know, an international context. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone who would like to share their viewpoints?
Well, I always bring up in these kind of questions that how do we measure the success of something, that it's usually we think of numbers that represent something, but I think all kind of things like how many degrees or where they are employed, how many stay in Finland, how many PhD we get to Finland, that's also an important one. But also we need kind of, also as researchers, we need more qualitative analysis of the situation, that how does this affect that the PhDs who go to companies and go to states and those who continue on academic career, how have they benefited? And maybe in this case, when we have these specific 1,000 doctors, then we can maybe also follow them and see what they end up in. So we have a group of people to study, maybe, perhaps, also.
Yes. So is it basically, how do we measure the quality of this pilot and the results, whether it's in terms of employment, whether it's in terms of graduation rates, and how is that result actually measured? Yeah.
I'd talk more in terms of successful placement rather than employed or not employed. So earlier I said that if this is education, how do we assess anyway also other forms of education? Successful placement. Successful placement meaning, let's say in non-academia, that they are in a position that meets the level and responsibility and the skill set that they have accumulated within the PhD. Because what that tells you is that a company has hired that person because of what they see in them, and that they hire them at that level. And so we can rely on the people that they are working with during their PhD, or the kinds of companies they're working with, to make a decision on whether they see merit in this person. And if we can put people in high-level expert jobs, then it means we've done something right. If, on the other hand, you have universities, top universities, hiring our PhD students into postdoctoral positions or tenure-track positions, it means they have seen value in them as a potential academic, and it means we've done something right. So successful placement, defined either in non-academic or academic terms, is a key performance indicator of whether we've done something right, because a third party has said, we see value in this graduate, in this role, and that means we've done something right. I think if you want to capture something more about impact more generally, then we might want to look at doctoral dissertation processes and look at, in addition to a scientific contribution, do we also want to see those kind of doctoral students produce a policy implication report? Would we like them to submit a short impact portfolio? Yeah? Again, we can innovate about the kind of things we want to look at and measure and assess, but that has to change in line with what we're gearing the doctoral education up to be.
Thank you. Thank you. That's quite an important KPI that you just mentioned, Adam. And Mary, do we have any questions online?
Thank you. Yes, there are several questions, but I will just raise a couple of topics from the different questions. Perhaps the panelists don't have direct answers, but you might have reflections on these topics. First of all, of course, there is the discussion, what's the content of doctoral education within 3 years? So how many articles can be, peer-reviewed articles can be published, or how the other doctoral studies, what's the content of doctoral education within 3 years? So your reflections on that matter, and perhaps Annu already has some ideas what has been discussed in the working group. The other question is related to research funding at large, and especially the equality between fields of science, and the worry for the funding situation of humanities and social sciences especially. So what are your reflections on the situation and position of so-called human sciences, soft sciences, within the large scale of research funding? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I can take the first one about articles and 3 years. It makes very little sense to compare across disciplines because you're comparing apples and oranges and talking about fruit. And there's not an awful lot of sense in that. I think within each discipline, you can discuss amongst yourselves what is a decent amount of work that would go into constituting a doctoral dissertation. And we shouldn't be comparing too much across disciplines because I don't think that's particularly productive. Again, I think where we'll probably be heading with this is, again, the doctoral dissertation for what? If you want a non-academic career, is publishing articles in top journals the thing that a supervisor should encourage them to do? Probably not.
Start with why. It's a very important question to ask in whatever we do actually. Yeah. Start with why and placing the why question on top. And Anu, what do you think about the funding situation? How could different universities be given, or different like subjects and departments in the universities could be given an equal opportunity when it comes to funding? In that case, like what Mary mentioned, like humanities and those areas.
Yes, well, regarding the funding, the equalness between the different fields?
Yes, like how would we make sure they also everyone gets equal chances? It wouldn't be like very, perhaps innovation focused or...
Yeah, well, first of all...
I assume that was the question, if Mary can confirm.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
For me, there are differences between the fields for sure, and there are different needs for different fields. What comes to the doctors, for example, but I really I'm not a fan of concentrating on one field. I understand that there are the differences exist, but I would go for this interdisciplinary collaboration between the fields and with disciplines. And also, I would encourage our doctoral researchers in the field of humanities, for example, look for the job opportunities in other fields and other sectors. So it should be a possibility, not a barrier for them.
Definitely, yeah. Yes, Paul.
One thing about this funding that kind of has not been discussed, that of course we are talking about 1,000 new doctors and the funding for it, but of course it's getting inserted into the system. So I think there will be also, I don't think, probably the people who are starting their PhD during next year, I don't think it will be 1,000 new extra, but those who were going to go do a doctorate and go into the 6-month grant limbo will instead get this and be more successful. But of course, the grant money and other forms of funding will be kind of increased, but it's a kind of full ecosystem. Yes. So we will have to see, but I would assume that kind of this surplus will also kind of trickle down, which might or might not be a good thing. One point about that is also that we know from the university funding and the ministry model that kind of money goes to money. When you get funding, like in this case, the funding is going to flagships who already have lots of funding, and now they will kind of save up on the doctoral education part and maybe use that funding for postdocs and permanent positions and things like that.
But a lot of interesting thoughts, I have to say, has been raised today, and we've been talking about like interdisciplinary sciences, funding, and why are you even starting a PhD? How would you provide additional supervision support to not only end up in academia, but also end up in industry as an early career researcher. And with that, we're coming to the end of this panel discussion. We're running quite short of time. And I would like to invite Jonni Ollonen. And he's a PhD researcher at the University of Helsinki. And please tell us your thoughts and what do you think? Thank you, Jonni.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me here to give a speech. I mean, I'm defending at the beginning of the next month, so
good luck.
It's a little bit like maybe not the most relevant person to talk to. I'm, of course, like, in case of all of these reforms that affect our university and how they are implemented here, I'm, of course, happy that I'm graduating before them. But jokes aside, I mean, I think it's marvelous that we are putting more money and resources and also attention into improving the doctoral education in Finland. That's superb. And especially that we get like funding there. In general, those ideas are really nice. I mean that more things are put there. Of course, I mean, I would have wished maybe a little bit more flexibility on the topics that are funded in there, like more maybe diversity in the fields that are funded. One comment that I might have also about this general academia project is that I would have wanted to know, like, what are the concrete acceptations of this pilot? Like, what do you consider a great success when you at the finishing of this pilot, and what is a good enough job? Just that universities will know that, and they don't try to guess and do, let's say, too much things, and so on. And another comment I might have is also the expectation management for the maybe like graduating in 3 years as a doctoral researcher. It is possible, I mean, I think, in theory at least. But I mean, it depends like what sort of a doctors we want here in Finland. Do we want them to be like good to a one specific purpose that will be useful maybe for the next 3 years or so? Or do we want some sort of a people who are capable of adapting to different situations and have actually the capabilities of doing different stuff and new stuff for the next 30 years? That's like one of my commentaries at least. Because I mean, it takes time for them to develop these skills, and PhD is a very good part in that, because that's the time when people have enough time to think and try, and especially fail. And I think the failures are the important thing there, that because they teach lots more than just having a row of successes, which I think is requirement for completing the thesis in 3 years. Yes, I need to check my notes. My handwriting is awful even for me. But anyway, I will think that we will get more doctors that we get. Practically, we are getting more contracts, at least for 3 years. That is nice. We will get more doctors in a certain time faster than we would without it. So thank you for that, of course. One thing that I would have wanted from hear from the universities is some sort of a commitment that maybe if the doctoral education takes 4 years, there's some sort of a commitment instead of like if, maybes and coulds, like for the next extra year, because you're getting 80,000 euros for one graduated student. Funding a 1 year doesn't reduce the money you get from that, like ridiculously much. Also, another thing that I would like to get is also that maybe when we are spending more money on the doctoral education, there would be resources allocated for career support after the PhD, that we actually put some money onto that as well. Because then you can actually have people who concentrate on doing that and so on, instead of that the supervisors try to think of something on their own. Which allows us to go to the next point that I would like to comment, like the supervision. So in my times as a doctoral researcher, the supervision has gotten quite a bit improvements in general, like at the level of Finland, at the level of the University of Helsinki. Like we got the recommendations from the union that this is a nice way to supervise students, so don't lock them in the basement or anything like that, sort of things. like basic human decency. And in University of Helsinki, we also have a system that we can actually monitor a little bit and how people agree on stuff, and also that do you meet your thesis committee enough that are there people who are not your supervisor telling you that this project is going fine and you should finish it at this point, and for example giving advice to career. So there are some ways to actually little bit enforce that other people who do not have interest to keep project going for eternity can say that you've done enough for a PhD. And also that you have some place where you can do an agreement that this is how we work with each other. And then people can go back to it that we agreed that this is how we communicate, this is what I'm supposed to do, this is what you're supposed to do. And if it's verbalized and written down, it eases things quite a bit, because then there is not like that the supervisor thinks something else than the person who's supervised. Also, I would like to point out that like the thesis committees have a really high potential, like not only about like thinking about the PhD as a project only and like giving some scientific advice, but they can also help in the career if you put right people to it. So if you have like connections who can tell you that I am from the industry, I can help you to go here, or that you have people who just have connections to get you more jobs. So this is also one useful thing. Then commenting about the supervision and the reforms, I might say that people might be too resigned to the things that old people cannot change at all. And we are just waiting for the old professors to retire and age off, and then we can maybe have nice things. But I mean, I think the system could somehow give a little bit of carrot to the people who try to actually put some effort, even to the ones who might not do it that voluntarily. Like you can give like maybe a boost that, yes, if you have this supervisor training that's really short, your students will get a boost also in the applications for money within the university. That's like one thing and normally a sensible supervisor wants to take some sort of a training after that. And also another thing is that it needs to be presented for the researchers in a sensible way, because university pedagogues normally fail this. You go to a seminar, you hear that everything you do is shit and you need to do at least 200 extra hours of work to make it better. But it should be actually like that you have these tiny tweaks that make both of your lives nicer, because you know how to communicate, you know how to work in a project. And also, if you take leadership skills, this is how you can make people who work for you more efficient without burning them out, for example.
Yes. Thank you, Joni. Do you have more points to add?
Yes, I have still and of course
All
like
right,
career,
go ahead,
one
yes.
final theme, if you allow me. I mean,
Absolutely.
of course, I'm trying to continue into academia, so I prefer to do some useless stuff for the time being, at least. So you need to take my opinions of this with a grain of salt.
With pleasure.
But I mean, like, if you think about the universities, one improvement that I could think of is also that you should think about these mid-stage permanent positions as well, because not everyone can become a PI with the current funding, but some people might be still efficient and useful enough that they can reduce the working hours from those who get those fundings enough that it's still the similar effect that you would get overheads from them. And then, of course, like one thing for the career, I would say again, like that what would help from the student perspective is that you make the students think early enough what do they want to do, and not like in general, but very precise verbalization. This is what you want to do. And then you can actually think about how to achieve it. Because most of the people just think about that I want to do research or I want to go to industry, which is really vague. You need to have something concrete, because then you have a goal that can be actually sensibly achieved. And I think the thesis committees are really useful for this. And another thing, of course, is that what I would recommend is that maybe if we allow the PhD student to spend a little bit longer time doing their PhD, they could have a work period like at the end of their PhD or when they finish the project, at the industry or public place or something else if they want to continue that career, because then they actually can get some experience, contacts, and kind of like the foot between the door there. But yeah, that was majority of my comments. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Joni. Thank you very much. And I hope the guys in FUURT and Paavo Petri, you guys have been taking notes, because he's the future of research, and it would directly, definitely affect people like you. Thank you, Joni, and good luck with your thesis. Thank you. And I would love to thank all the panelists, Adam, Pauli, and Annu, for your beautiful perspectives, and for everyone here who has shared their thoughts, also the people online. Let's wave at them. Thank you, guys. And before we close the event and we end the day, I would love to invite Tero again. Tero to the stage. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Khalil. Since we have run out of time, just big warm thanks to everybody, especially the staff here at Tiedekulma, and especially our staff in FUURT for making this possible, this event. And referring to Adam, let's keep asking the right questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Tero. Thank you all. And yes, let's keep asking the right questions. This was just the beginning of asking questions, and the stage is all yours, and it will not end. Please get in contact with FUURT. You know, they have a survey also on their website. Fill it, and it's an ongoing discussion. Thank you all. Thank you for being here.